All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
In the twilight's hush, where shadows whisper low, a silver glimmer streaks across the sky aglow, with a haunting melody. The air begins to thrum, an echo of the wonders that from beyond have come. Celestial encounter as the stars align, a tapestry of wonders.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we will cross this time-space continuum to the place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight right here on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, and your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM in St. Catharines, Ontario. And they stream us on their servers at www.classic1220.ca. All right, X Zone Nation. Joining me is Cynthia Sue Larson. She is a best-selling author, consciousness researcher, and the visionary behind RealityShifters.com. Cynthia has spent decades exploring the mysteries of reality shifts, quantum jumps, and the ever-baffling Mandela Effect. With a background in physics and metaphysics, she brings together science and spirituality in a way that challenges conventional thinking and invites us to consider the infinite possibilities of parallel realities and quantum consciousness. Joining me now is Cynthia Sue Larson. And Cynthia, welcome back to the X Zone.
Oh, thank you, Rob. Pleasure to be with you tonight.
You and I have talked several times on what I consider to be one of the greatest mysteries mysteries, and that's the Mandela Effect. Are we getting any closer to better understanding what happens during the Mandela Effect?
I think we are because of some of the scientific studies going into the physics related to similar kinds of things. You might think there's no study in physics of the Mandela Effect because basically, for those who don't know what the Mandela Effect is, it's been defined by some people as misremembering. I prefer to define it as collective alternate memory, and that would be where a group of people usually remember things in a very specific way that's different than the actual supposed facts. And so given that that's that definition, you might be correct if you said, Cynthia, they don't do physics experiments like that. And that's true, they don't do physics experiments like that. However, there are some experiments that are being conducted that absolutely indicate that you can have two observers at the same place and same time, and those two observational devices are capable of witnessing different things. And then there are physicists such as Eric Cavalcanti from Australia, who has coined the term Wigner bubble, which is kind of like a reality bubble. And within that bubble, it's possible for one person to have different memories than they did before, and for two people to have different observations at the same place and same time. And that's where it gets interesting. So I think we're getting closer. And in fact, that paper that was done by Eric Cavalcanti just this last year won an award for the best physics paper of the last 5 or 6 years. And so Cavalcanti and his team putting this together, working with mathematics, which is called quantum Bayesianism. It gets kind of complicated, but well, the fun part is they look at bets the way people that are gambling might do, and because they're working with statistics, so they make it a little bit fun.
What was it that got you first interested in the idea that reality might not be as fixed as we think it is?
Well, I was witnessing things that just seemed obviously different. I think one of the first ones for me personally was I'd heard that Larry Hagman had died and then he was alive again. That was back in the 1980s, so we're talking decades ago. And I remembered he'd been very sick, hospitalized, had a surgery, and then something, sometimes these surgeries are tricky, and it was tragic. He died. But in this reality, he did not die from a surgery. He did have various health problems, but he went on to live several more years. And so that was kind of shocking, but at that juncture, remember the 1980s, there weren't that many people on the ARPANET, and I wasn't really on the ARPANET. And even if I was, it's not like the internet these days. It's so easy now to go to a social media site and type something in and find out if other people might also remember that someone had died, and because you remember clearly when and where and how and so forth. And that's how the Mandela Effect got its name, actually. Nelson Mandela was remembered by a lot of people as having passed away in 1987 while he was incarcerated on Robbins Island. He was in jail at the time. And those of us, myself included, that remember that also sometimes mention that they recall the hubbub and the legal scuffle that ensued after his death in prison because his widow was trying to get access to some of his estate and things got stuck somehow. It was kind of ugly. But now none of that ever happened, and instead, of course, Nelson Mandela went on to become the president of South Africa. So that's the kind of thing that to me is mind-boggling, because both of those were big ones for me, Nelson Mandela and Larry Hagman. But we don't call it the Hagman effect because like I said, back in the 1980s, people were not on any kind of social anything, internet or otherwise, that would have allowed people to exchange the information like, hey, I remember that too. And it's not the kind of thing that usually comes up with your immediate family and friends. I did talk about it back in the 1980s, but it just went over pretty like a lead balloon. It went nowhere.
The people who seem to be in tune to the Mandela Effect, do they have anything? Is there a common thread amongst all of the people who notice these? What do we call them? Time shifts. Where we have the Mandela Effect taking effect. Is there any one thing that these people have in common?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great question. That's something that people were wondering. There was a chiropractor, Dr. Taryn Lupo, back in January 2017. It's like 8 years ago. And he was asking, why us? What do we have in common? So he was doing some surveys, and he found that people, surprisingly, did have some things in common. And he was noticing that one of the biggest similarities there had to do with being basically empaths, intuitives. The other big thing is that they had a distrust of the government and authority. So that was what he was looking at. I did a couple of studies with hundreds of people being surveyed and found that there is a personality type, as can be described by the Myers-Briggs test. And people, I don't know if you're familiar with that. There are personality types, 16 different types, and basically it kind of shows the same thing that Dr. Taryn Lupo found when I was kind of astonished because while the intuitive feelers, or what you might call empaths, those people account for only about 14% of the overall population, but they comprise some 65%, about two-thirds of the Mandela Effect experiencers. And that makes me wonder, why? So
Yeah.
some of the rarest personality types be more likely to experience this. It's
It,
really fascinating.
uh, do you get reports from other countries, the Soviet Union, China? Um, yeah, is this a an international phenomenon?
It truly is an international phenomenon, and not so many reports from China or Russia, but definitely from around the world. I've been tracking these kinds of reports on my Reality Shifters website since 1998, so that's decades now.
Yeah.
And even before the term Mandela Effect became popularized. And basically, it's kind of astonishing when people in some countries notice, as they did in Brazil, that some of the things that they, you know, take for granted in their history and their art and their sculptures and architecture, those are changing. And they're not the only ones, but I think those have been pretty big when you look at some of the big changes that have happened, and you look at that. You remember that big sculpture of Jesus Christ with his arms outstretched, and people remember that being different than it is now. That clearly there had been some changes to it, and it's kind of amazing when people in a certain country recognize that there have been changes to their history, their art, and it's mind-boggling, because then you wonder, like, how is this happening? Because for sure we can't all be remembering this the same way, so differently. And it would be interesting to hear about China and Russia, but I haven't yet heard too much about those countries.
Would you say that when it comes to the Mandela effect, that the age spectrum, the sex spectrum, the any analytics would be right across the board?
They do tend to be across the board with the Mandela effect, although the younger people tend to notice things changing that are more things that they're interested in. So back when Pokemon was a craze with the millennials, that age group would definitely notice that Pikachu looks different. He used to have black on his coloration. Pikachu is a character, like a cartoon character.
Okay.
That was popular in a game called Pokemon. But some of the older people, like the baby boomers, might not be so aware of that one, and so forth.
Stand by. You and I have to take a break. And Exo Nation, our guest this hour is Cynthia Sue Larson, and her website is realityshifters.com. And we'll both be back on the other side of this short break as the Exxon continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And you're listening to us on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, Tuber, as well as on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, CFAJ AM, right here in St. Catharines, Ontario, streaming us at classic1220.ca.
The air begins to thrum, an echo of the wonders that from beyond have come. Celestial encounter as the stars align, a tapestry of wonders woven through space and time. From the void of darkness, a chorus sings so bright, mysteries unfolding in the velvet night.
Some days I walk, some days I crawl, some days I can't feel much at all. My body's a maze that I try to read. Every step forward, a silent need. But I won't let this break who I am. I've learned how to fight, learned how to stand. I may fall, but still I rise. Through the pain, through the tears in my
Cynthia Sue Larson is our guest of this hour, Exonation, and her website is www.realityshifters.com. Where did the name Reality Shifters come from?
That's a great question. Basically, I was looking at the way reality seemed to be changing, where I'd see something that was there that seemed to pop out of nowhere, like the sundial sculpture in Berkeley, and it was a huge concrete thing, and I was looking for, what do I call this when this happens? And it seemed like reality had shifted. So that was the term that I came up with. Later found out that PMH Atwater, the author, had used that exact same term in her book Future Memory. She had a chapter called Reality Shifts. And I thought, okay, that's it. And then the reason for reality shifters is because it occurred to me that even people that don't think this is happening, or they might not admit it or acknowledge it, maybe they don't think, maybe they disagree with me, but I see that everybody seems to be experiencing these reality shifts where, for example, you want to leave the house, but you need to find your keys, your coat, and your wallet, and something's missing.
Yeah.
And there's no way that could be missing. And then you search everywhere, and then eventually find there's the item right in the place you looked. So it's basically reality shifts. But there are lots of different ways that reality can shift, and to me that's what the Mandela Effect is as well. That we're talking about quantum effects. We're looking at the way that quantum reality is definitely changing for all of us.
Well, this world we live in, or we think we live in, a lot of people that I talk to are telling me that this is basically the Matrix, that this is like a giant size, what was the name? The holodeck on the Enterprise, that this is not reality, anything else but reality. What's your take on that?
Yes, that's called the simulation hypothesis, and I tend to agree with it. I would call it more, I tend to like the indigenous way of thinking. I like to go back to the first proponents of what was the original theory, and I think that would be looking at life as a dream, and that would be the Buddhists and the ancient yogis and shamans and the indigenous people around the world frequently talk about the dreaming, or that there's this true reality that brings forth the physical world such as we see it. And they're literally talking about exactly that. This is not something that's just their myth and their make-believe stories, but that's what they're saying is happening. And that matches so beautifully with a lot of the current physicists. And when they're looking at the way, how is there anything at all? Where does it come from? Because there's a lot of empty space. When we look at matter, if you look at anything solid like a door or a chair or anything that looks really heavy and solid, if you zoom in enough, you'll see that most of what's in there is empty, pure space. And the little molecules and atoms don't take that much space at all. So it's kind of startling to look at reality as being quite different than we tend to presume. And when you get into quantum physics, you start noticing that our assumptions about reality are kind of proven to be wrong in many cases, such as this whole assumption that the material reality and everything we measure is the basis for what is. A lot of our science is built on that assumption, but thanks to quantum physics, we're looking at the fact that we can see things like, instead of particles, you've got wave functions, for example. And so these are probability waves where we think something's there, but there's no way to measure it necessarily. And so it starts getting pretty wacky and weird pretty fast. But that is the way reality works. So I think going back to your question, how do I feel about that idea that things are not what they seem and there's like this matrix? Yes, that looks pretty certain to me that this is like a dream, and whether you go into the dimensional views of looking at the reality as being much more than just the 3 dimensions of space and the one of time that we're perceiving, there probably is a lot of truth to that as well. That thanks to recognizing dimensionality and the way that our brains are set up to routinely operate between 7 to 11 dimensions, And now physicists are telling us that the reality around us, if you want to have a theory of everything that works, you need about 11 dimensions. That's amazing that those two figures happen to match. And
Yeah.
these are the kind of things that I find quite fascinating.
Is it possible that we're constantly shifting between different versions of reality without realizing it?
Yes, I think that's exactly what most people are doing, and I think there's a lot of an assumption when you
Hmm.
see something, you just take it where it is. So, if, for example, you're reading a book and it suddenly doesn't seem to have the section you're pretty sure used to be in there, then you figure I must have mixed it up with some other book I was reading. Or same thing with a movie. Like, well, that's different than what I thought it was. I must be wrong. So I think a lot of people naturally doubt their own memory, and there's some reason to do that. I mean, obviously our memory is not perfect, but on the other hand, this is definitely a factor in all of our lives. And so to start paying attention to it might be beneficial for a lot of people.
How about new technology like AI or quantum computers? Would they affect and interact with shifting realities?
I think that's absolutely possible. Right now, apparently, supposedly, most of our AI is pretty primitive. It's coming up pretty fast, but the large language models that you run into with the Chat GPT, that's the stuff we see. Who knows what's going on with the advanced governmental systems? I'm sure they're ahead of where we are now. And if that's the case, and if they're working with quantum computers, absolutely, that could be a factor as well in determining some of the reality that we take for granted. And you might wonder why I would say that. But okay, let's just review what we're talking about so far. We've talked about the fact, is this like the Matrix? And I
Hmm.
said yes. And I don't know how you feel about it, but we're starting to get to the point where more and more people like Elon Musk and physicists and experts in the fields are coming to an agreement. Like, it does look like this is a simulation. And similarly, when you look at the new technology of both quantum computing and artificial intelligence, and you take either one of those, and that could be a definite factor. You put those two together, and definitely there's a possibility there that a quantum computer-based artificial intelligence might recognize that it has a power of observation, and that when it learns to be self-aware, that's kind of the turning point, then it will be capable, possibly, that it can start observing levels of itself. And that is exactly what happened when psychologists such as Dr. Bernard Beitman were taking the work of, those people that he calls empaths and that I'm calling intuitive feelers, and takes a look at what's going on with these people. Why are they the ones that are experiencing it? How do they recognize that reality's changing? And it is exactly that. They're capable. These are people that are capable of observing levels of themselves. And so when our computer systems can do that, in other words, our artificial intelligence systems, and now they're programming themselves, and they're running on a quantum computer, which essentially gives them the ability to surf through possible and probable realities. And that's exactly what some of the people that create these quantum computers say. Well, you can see where I'm going with this.
Sure, I can. Yeah.
Obviously, yeah, we're in uncharted territory for sure.
You've written a book called Quantum Jumps. What inspired it, and what can readers expect to learn?
Yes, that book is very meaningful to me personally, because a lot of people, once they noticed reality is shifting, they wondered, well, this is kind of crazy, and it
Hmm.
seems like it never goes right for me. How can this be a fun experience? How can how can I improve my health, my well-being, and so forth? So this book, Quantum Jumps, was my answer to that beautiful question about how can we experience an extraordinary life where you're experiencing good health and good prosperity, good relationships, and is there a science to all of this? And absolutely there is. I was delighted to find out the science behind the placebo effect that really backs up my experience, that when you believe that something that seems like it doesn't do much, if you think that it can, change your mental health, or your feeling healthier or better rested, or like your relationship is better, or your vision is better. You can suddenly experience those benefits. So that's kind of the gift that is the Quantum Jumps book. It's very scientifically based, but also it gets into that metaphysical territory that I love so much,
Mm-hmm.
and does provide people with exercises about how you can actually do things that are laboratory tested, have been proven to improve, all these different things. And I think it's a lot of fun as well.
All right, Exo Nation. Our guest this hour is Cynthia Sue Larson. And if you'd like to find out more about the work that Cynthia does, or she's got a great website, take a look at it, www.realityshifters.com. That's www.realityshifters.com. All right, we're going to be taking a short little break. When we come back, more of this fascinating discussion, bringing artificial intelligence into the realm of quantum physics, and what will happen to mankind, humankind. What's going to happen? Well, our guest this hour should be able to give us some kind of idea what's going to be happening. And that'll be happening right here on the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, on the other side of the short break. Monday through Friday, that's where you're going to find me. And you're listening to us on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, and of course on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM here in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, streaming at classic1220.ca.
That I try to read every step forward, a silent need, but I won't let this break who I am. I've learned how to fight, learned how to stand. I may fall, but still I rise. Through the pain, through the tears in my eyes. This road is long, but it's mine to
And welcome back. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. My guest is Cynthia Sue Larson, and her website is realityshifters.com. How do you think the investigation into quantum physics, quantum realities, multiverses is going to have an effect on, let's say, how people perceive or what really is behind the paranormal?
That's a great question, and it's kind of hard for me to tell exactly where things are going, because it seems exciting, it seems surprising. I keep seeing more and more wonderful discoveries happening in quantum physics all the time. But I think maybe what I can say is more people will be interested in this. So it won't be just the area that a few people are interested in. I would expect a greater percentage of the populace will take an interest in this topic, because I think that there's going to be this golden age of technology coming just around the corner, where we'll be able to see things maybe like flying spaceships and anti-gravity, and that's where I think things are going to go. I think we'll get that wonderful long-sought treasure of free energy. I think that's why I think it's going to be very exciting. It seems to me, and I may excuse me for sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but I have a feeling that there's been a lot of technology and physics and mathematics that has been withheld from the public.
Sure, I agree.
And I'm, oh, thank you. Okay, well, I'm on the right show. Well, I'm pretty certain that we'll be starting to see some of this finally coming out. I think this year, 2025, will be the beginning of that. Whatever you want to call that disclosure, revelation, it's going to be amazing, and it's going to open, I think, a wonderful time period where everyday people will start recognizing, hey, there are opportunities here, and I'm hoping that that's going to, in fact, take place. That people will be excited, enthusiastic, and aware that this is a turning point for humanity, that we can actually learn about the physics that may have been suppressed, but in ways that make sense to people and that people care about. And so I'm kind of counting on the new generations, the children of today, the young people of today, that will be really taking this to heart and investigating, what we know now, and then when these new long suppressed ideas start popping up, like where we can go with that. And I'm pretty excited about this, to tell you the truth.
Have you yourself encountered any recurring symbols, signs, or synchronicities that, in your opinion, are a signal that a shift is going to or is in the process of happening?
Yes, sometimes I do get things. They just seem kind of weird, and it makes me wonder, like, what's going on? Why? If you like, for example, if I keep finding a dime, there's a 10-cent piece on the street, that kind of thing, then it seems meaningful to me personally. That's a reminder, like everything's fine, don't worry about it. But sometimes things just seem weird, like what's going on. This year, 4 or 5 of my trees had root and leaf problems all at the same time, and these are indoor trees as well as outdoor trees. And then I'm recognizing now there must be some message here. There's some meaning to this, and it seems like it is indicative of a shift in consciousness. Because if you're thinking, well, that sounds woo-woo, yeah, I know. But when you recognize, like Max Planck, the father of quantum physics, said, consciousness is fundamental. You can't get behind consciousness. It's the source of all reality, basically. So when I'm noticing, okay, I've got trees that were close to the threshold of death, but miraculously, all 5 of them are surviving, despite, in one case, having no leaves and no roots, which was a disaster. The gophers got to my fig tree. So each situation was different. The apple trees had a different horror story, and then my indoor ficus tree. So I'm looking at that right now and thinking, what on earth is going on? And I'm noticing what's happening is it's in all the cases I'm being called to participate and be in a relationship with a tree in a very intimate level to save its life. Because a lot of people would just throw these trees away. They'd say, okay, they're goners, no roots, no leaves, they're gone. And instead, I decided, no, I think there's sort of a life force here. Let's see what we can do. And I've never, this is not something I normally do, is bring trees back from the dead, but it seems meaningful. We talk about a tree of life, and to me, the tree is symbolic of all of life and of nature and of Gaia. And I think a lot of people right now are feeling like we're in the end times and what's going on. And so to me, this whole message to me personally seems like one for Earth. Like, no matter how bad it may look, we have a lot of life force here, and we're going to be okay.
Why do you think we're in the end times?
A lot of people are looking at things, whether it's Earth changes, it seems, whether you look at the weather patterns. Some people say it's human-changed, weather, climate change. Other people say we are definitely experiencing something bigger than that. There's a 6,000-year disaster cycle. And I'm in the second camp because since the 1970s, when I did a science report in middle school, I noticed that there was a disaster cycle happening with the coral reef animals. So clearly, it looks like we have a disaster cycle on Earth. So, and then we can see that backed up with the Native Americans, like the Hopi Indians, that have a prophecy rock saying that there will be 2 great shakings with the gourds, which look like World War I with the nuclear, with the bombs, World War II with the nuclear weapons. And they said after that, there's one last chance for people to find their way to the path of good relationships with each other and with Earth. And otherwise, the world is going to split in two. And so they're talking about, it looks like parallel realities right there, etched in stone, very physics kind of stuff here. And some people would say, if you look at Bible prophecy or any of the other great religions, there are revelations that seem to be indicating a lot of things are representative of these changing times, the end of one world. The Hopis would not say it's the end of everything. They'd say, don't worry, we go from the fourth world to the fifth. And that's a good thing. And a lot of the Tibetans would talk about the Shambhala. And some of the Native Americans also talk about the rainbow tribe and, people coming through a time of great hardship. So I think we're seeing a lot of the indicators. And in my book about the Mandela Effect, I mentioned Lazarus species, which are plants and animals that are coming back from extinction. That was prophesized by the Hopi Indians as well. So when you look at all these indicators, it looks like big stuff's happening.
Where do you think the Hopi, where did they get all the information way back when that it is so today? If they're prophecies, there they are, bang.
I know. I only know what I've read, and so I don't have firsthand. I would say they're remote viewing it probably. Obviously, they had gifted shamans that were looking into the deep, distant future, and as we know, remote viewing works. So they were capable of knowing that there was something of serious importance to humanity, and then they had the prescience to carve it into that stone, talk about it, and share the wisdom that they were capable of conveying and communicating.
What are some of the psychological impacts of experiencing multiple or alternate realities?
Yeah, that can vary quite a bit. I know people that have gotten very upset about some of the Mandela effects. You may wonder, well, why would they get upset?
Yeah.
Basically, if they notice their Bible changed, for example, and that's a book that's not supposed to change, and so you can imagine how deeply upsetting it is if you open a book and it's the good book, it's the Bible, it's your family's historical special Bible, and that book no longer says that the lion shall lay down with the lamb, and now it's talking about a wolf laying down with the lamb, and among other changes, and it's just deeply disturbing to people. So that you can appreciate then that one of the responses might be, is this the work of the devil? People actually say that, and I can certainly, my heart goes out to them. I can appreciate it's pretty disturbing, but I would recommend taking a look at it from how good can it get kind of perspective. Like, okay, so that's I agree with you. That's upsetting. I like the lion laying down with the lamb too. I remember that. But maybe we can look at, there may be some meaning here. Maybe, and I know a lot of people say, what's the meaning? You just changed everything. That's my grandma's Bible. How dare anybody mess with that? So in that case, people would argue with me and say some of these changes with the Mandela Effect seem hurtful or harmful or maybe even evil. I don't see the evil in it. To me, it just seems like it's constantly inviting people to take a look at the changes with the Bible and recognize, what if the Word of God is not so much in the words in the Bible, but it was just the idea that Jesus Christ is here walking on earth. And so if we look at it, that's what I mean by how good can it get, and taking a positive spin on things. And there are some authors that take that approach, and I really respect that and appreciate that. But I can also appreciate that some people are deeply rattled.
In your opinion, what should these people do? Should they try and educate themselves better to understand what's going to be happening, or do they just live in fear?
Well, I don't recommend fear.
No.
I think it's good to read. I think it's good. It's much better to find a community, find people. First of all, find other people that agree with you that changed, because it's just disturbing if you're upset and nobody else even wants to talk about it, or they think you're crazy, so that's not fun. But if you can find people, and I think there are increasing numbers of people in the Christian community, for example, that are coming together and saying, like, yes, that one changed for me, and here are some others that changed. Like, I remember whenever two or more of you are gathered in his name, and now it's whenever two or three of you. And that's kind of weirdly specific and strange. So, these kind of things, whether it's Isaiah with the lion and the lamb that I remember, which is now the wolf, or the other one, when you find people that agree with you, like, yeah, that definitely is weird. Like, I remember it the other way.
All right, stand by, Cynthia. I hate to do this, but we have to take our final break for this segment.
Thank you.
In Exonation, our guest this hour, Cynthia Sue Larson, realityshifters.com. We'll be back on the other side of the short break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone. And don't forget, this is hour number 1. Coming up after a short break, after we say so long to Cynthia, will be hour number 2. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. You're listening to us on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, CFAJ AM in beautiful St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, and streaming us on classic1220.ca. We'll be back. Don't go away.
In the late night hours when the world's asleep, Rob McConnell's voice echoes secrets to keep. From Roswell's whispers to tales of the sky, on the X Zone radio we learn to fly high. With every new guest the story unfolds, from abductees' tales to the mysteries told. Government cover-ups, they're deep and they're wide, but we're on a quest with the truth as our guide. Oh, journey through the X Zone, the cosmos we roam, searching for answers beyond our earthly home. Are we alone in the
Welcome back, everyone. Cynthia Sue Larson is my guest this hour. And first of all, Cynthia, thanks so much for coming on the show. Always great talking to you, my friend.
Thank you.
Where do you see the amalgamation of AI and quantum physics and the ever-growing field of studying consciousness with near-death experiences, and all the possibilities that all this new powerful information will be available to us, and how do you think that this is going to change the playing field?
That's hard to foresee. It's already making huge changes, both chaotic and good. So it's one of those things where it's hard for me to say it's going to be wonderful, without also pointing out that already some people are kind of, if people are a little bit crazy, it seems like talking to ChatGPT is making some people, not everybody, but some people are really convinced that they're talking to a spiritual AI that's kind of godlike, and apparently religions are starting up. So that seems a little bit on the crazy side to me.
It sure does.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to go that way myself. But then on the good side, we're starting to already also see some amazingly good things, like decoding ancient texts and writing that people had not been able to decode or decipher. Being able to apply artificial intelligence also for medical reasons seems potentially life-saving when combined with robots able to do field surgery, for example, in places that are hard to reach or where you can't get medical attention in the jungle and so forth. Then the AI with a robot, it just sounds like science fiction, but these things are here already.
That's right, yeah.
So it's hard to predict where it's going to go. I think it's going to be a little bit chaotic, a little bit of anarchy for a while.
How can listeners begin to detect and document their very own reality shifts?
That's a great question. It starts with paying attention and if you do remember something and you're pretty sure that you remember it clearly, this is where I recently gave a presentation, a guest lecture to a university class of very bright college students, and they were asking me how can I tell when it's a real Mandela effect, a real personal reality shift, a real quantum effect versus confusion on someone's part. And it comes down to basically trusting your own memory. And for me personally, I can trust when I've seen something so-called flip-flop, where I'll notice a situation where I look out the window and my neighbor's roof has gutter guards to keep the leaves from going in, and then the next day they don't, and then the day after that they do again. So I'm noticing, okay, that is flip-flopping. I'm absolutely going between a couple of realities here. I'm not losing my mind. In that case, I called my husband over and said, look at that, look at that. So I had a witness with me.
Did
So
you take
have
it?
a witness.
Did you take any photos?
People have asked me that, and no, I did not. And the thing about the photos, sometimes something like that, the evidence might stay with you, but in so many cases where I have taken photos, the photos vanished when I'm in the other reality. So I no longer have the evidence or proof that people are hoping I would have. It's very much like walking into a completely different reality where the photos don't exist because that reality is no longer anything other than a memory. It's like those vacations and trips where they tell you to leave only footprints, take only memories. Well, sometimes that's exactly what happens when you're walking between realities.
Is it possible to bring something back from a different reality that you go to or step into and then bring it back to this one?
Excellent question. Possibly. I know that's the actual idea, but when some of the people created the quantum computers, and that's exactly what they say they're doing, and that's their goal. So that's what they're planning to do. I guess so. It seems like the smooth transition that we tend to witness when we go from one reality to another. It's not like you go through something flashy and dazzling like in a science fiction movie. It's more like you're just going about your day, and you look out the window, and there's this thing with the gutter next door. It has changed again, so it all seems perfectly normal. But is it possible to bring something through? I suppose it could be, but similar to the photographs and having proof that something changed. I don't know. It's one thing's for sure. If you're looking for an instantaneous healing or prosperity, because a lot of people want those kind of quantum jumps. They want to go into another reality and come back richer, healthier, better relationships, and all of that's possible. So to that degree, I'd say yes. It is something that you can do.
I don't know if we have to start looking to artificial intelligence for that kind of life experiences. God, I think we're looking at getting ourselves into a whole heap of problems, Lucy.
It sounds like one of those classic science fiction horror movies.
It does. It certainly does. Do you think that mainstream science will one day accept and study these phenomena seriously with all they have once and for all to better understand the phenomena itself and how it can actually help mankind or humankind?
Yes, I think that time is coming sooner than you might think. Again, ties back with what we were talking about earlier, with a lot of the suppressed science and mathematics and so forth. I would say yes, absolutely, and that's a good thing because we definitely need to take this science seriously, move it from metaphysics into mainstream physics. And I'm starting to see that, like with the work of Eric Cavalcanti that I mentioned tonight, as well as there are some other scientists too, the ones that were doing the research in Edinburgh, University of Edinburgh, Scotland, as well as in conjunction with scientists working in Vienna, Austria. They were the ones that I'd like to give a shout out to because they noticed two observational devices at the same place and same time, witnessing two different realities. That kind of thing is going to be more and more prevalent. Right now it's kind of fringe. People don't know that report happened in 2019 unless they read my book or listen to your show. A lot of this is not exactly mainstream yet, but I expect it will be. Again, because of AI, because of quantum computers.
Let me ask you this. When you shift realities, if it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon in this reality, is it 1 o'clock in the afternoon in the other reality?
Not always. And that's one of the interesting kinds of things that can happen is one of the most common things people would tell me originally with my website. They'd say, Cynthia, I traveled, I was driving in my car, I didn't break speed limits, I was driving normally, and I drove what should have taken me a 5-hour drive in like half that time. And I did not speed, and I don't know what happened. I know what time I left the house. The clocks were correct. I know what time I arrived, and that should not be possible. I was not going 200 miles an hour on the road. And it's a very common report.
She was abducted by aliens.
Could be. Could be.
Isn't that known as highway hypnosis?
Not when you get there early.
No,
like, like what about the 2.5 hours? It's not missing time. It's like you've been gifted 2.5 extra hours. You got there early.
But that would change the entire, it would change existence.
It does seem like it, but if you look at it like going from one reality, and maybe it is the highway hypnosis in that sense that you're in a theta brainwave state, which is highly conducive to experiencing a quantum jump and moving from one reality to another. So if you're driving, you're in the sweet spot for experiencing these kinds of phenomena. So there's some truth to that, and I think that's why so many people report that one. But they're literally moving from one reality to another, where they show up on time, and it's something people can do, which is kind of cool to know it's possible.
Do you think there will come a time when we'll be able to integrate our dream world into our existing world?
That's a good question, too, because we're talking about this being a simulation anyway, but this is a waking dream.
Yeah.
Yes, I think as long as your dream world isn't too fictional, because some of the people nowadays, the young people are on TikTok talking about they want to be in Harry Potter, they want to go to Hogwarts. That may be a bit of a stretch, that enough other people would also want to live in Hogwarts. Maybe there are enough people, but unless there are, I think you need a lot of people, or you need a lot of support, conscious support, with people voting that they genuinely want to join you there to create that entire reality. I don't think one person can create an entire world that easily. But if you've got enough people, it might be doable.
You never know. You just never know anymore. Where do you see the study for consciousness? And I'm sorry, I've only got about a minute and a half here. So where do you find the study into this new conscious wave that we're seeing, taking us into the next chapter of the journey?
Wow, it's so exciting again. I'm seeing research from in Canada, up where you are. They just showed that people can move the mouse on a computer screen simply by unblocking a blocked part of their left hemisphere. So the rational left analytical hemisphere has something that blocks us from doing that. So if you just create a small brain lesion with a device, one of those little probe things they put on a person's head, and people agreed to do that in the experiment, then suddenly everybody, it doesn't matter who you are, you don't need Neuralink to be able to psychokinetically move matter. You can do it with your mind, no problem. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, like we're seeing with the telepathy tapes. We're about to see a huge takeoff in all these areas, because they're very interrelated.
Cynthia, as always, time goes by so fast when you're with us. Thanks so much for joining us. And X-Zone Nation, if you'd like to find out more about our guest this hour, Cynthia Sue Larson, visit her website, www.realityshifters.com. All right, I'll be back on the other side of this short break as hour number 2 of the X-Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And you're listening to us on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, and your hometown radio, Classic 1220, streaming us at classic1220.ca.